Senator Rubio.
Thank you. Thank you for the committee for holding this hearing. It's great to see Mr. Plank here from Hillsborough County in Florida. We had a chance to speak on the phone the other night, and but really this is for the entire panel. We talk about STEM education as just something good that we do in the country, and I think this committee and obviously this panel understands it's much more than that. These dramatic changes in our economy are happening at a pace that humanity has never seen. I always tell people we're having the Industrial Revolution, but it's happening every 3, 4, 5 years. And of course, that's displaced a lot of people. And so if you just look at every aspect of our economy and you project out 10, 15, 20 years, it's hard to imagine any field of work that will not require some level of basic proficiency in science or technology, even if people don't envision it that way. There's been extensive coverage, for example, of the oil industry and some of these platforms that were once operated by numerous people on the ground and now are increasingly operated remotely through the use of technology, all the way down to the fast food sector. I'm sure everyone has seen an increasingly number of restaurants that are first piloting and ultimately will move towards these touchscreen orders. And it begs the question, who's going to design those machines, who's going to maintain them, and who's going to replace them when new ones are being designed. So literally every field is moving, every aspect of our life and of our society is becoming increasingly technologically reliant, and there is no reason to believe the workforce. Now, the one thing I am very confident is that if you don't have 21st century skills, you are truly going to struggle to find work in this country and in the 21st century to provide the sort of expectations people have. And that's why STEM education, and we talk about it as kind of a small piece of our education that some people might try to go into because it has good paying jobs. I actually think we need to have a broader conversation about why basic STEM education should be increasingly become a part of our overall curriculum, determined at the state level, of course, because I just can't imagine any field of work in the next 10 or 15 years that won't require everyone to be proficient to some degree on the use and application of technology. So I'm concerned that our education system in this country is not yet there. And I'm curious to hear from the panel, what can we do at the federal level without mandates? So I don't want us to design a national curriculum that we then go back and tell people this is what you must teach. But what can we do to incentivize an acceleration in this process and this recognition that basic science, technology, engineering, and math concepts are a critical basic education tool for the 21st century? How can we incentivize and accelerate that process? And I will start with our Floridian on the panel, Mr. Plank.
Thank you, Senator Rubio. And as I shared in our phone conversation, I think what we need to do is create time and space and support for schools to take risks and to grow. When they're thinking about this iterative cycle and design thinking and problem-based learning and computational thinking and computer science that we would like to incorporate, as Ms. King has shared, all the way down into our earliest years of education, districts and states need some flexibility to try new things. In terms of a curriculum that incorporates computer science, how do we build those opportunities into a kindergarten classroom all the way up through a high school classroom with limited time? We're not going to add more additional days to the school year, and I would suspect that we're not going to add any more additional time to the school day. So how do we reframe those things? And so what we would hope is that through grant funding or other funding streams that we might have the opportunity to take those risks as school districts, try new things, and implement some of the research that we know is effective.
Thank you. I think I would highlight two things. I think one is continuing federal investments in areas like Head Start and Title I that get our youngest learners and our most disadvantaged learners the supports that they need and their teachers and families need to help set that strong foundation for STEM going forward. We have great examples across our state where those are critical pieces of the equation of delivering a really strong STEM education, offering the STEM enrichment that our students deserve and our teachers need for their professional development. I think the other piece around incentives is every time we're in Washington State, incentives from the federal government have required private sector and state and local matches. We've been able to more than meet and exceed that. So I think registered apprenticeships and things that bring employers to the table are also important.
Thank you, Senator.
I will tell you that I have been really excited in the past couple of years by opportunities that have traditionally not been opened up to community colleges that have been. A number of NSF grants are focusing on community colleges now. A number of NASA grants are focusing on community colleges now, providing professional development for community college instructors and faculty members so that they have state-of-the-art knowledge about exactly what Dr. Lamb was talking about earlier, access to, to the latest cutting-edge techniques. And frankly, that historically has not been open to the community college world. So I have been very, very grateful for that and very thankful that that has happened. I think one of the things, and it's not an addition of monies, but it's an acknowledgement that what we do at community colleges is fundamentally different than what happens at baccalaureate institutions. And so there are differences in terms of length of program, when programs begin, what it looks like to work with an employer, what it looks like to have an internship opportunity, that might require broadening of definitions for some of the grants that are made available, that would encourage our colleges to continue to innovate. Community colleges are very, very good at innovating. There's an infrastructure problem in place as far as making sure that you have enough trained faculty, that you have the professional development that you need, that you have the equipment that you need to provide the types of state-of-the-art technology that our students need and that our companies need us to have. I do think we've come a long way, and the federal government's come a long way in supporting community colleges very, very differently than it has in the past. I would just encourage you to continue to do so.
One of the challenges in going last is that many of the wonderful ideas have already been said. I would argue that, or advocate for a word that we've heard from Mr. Plank before, which is braid, that very intentionally we weave together multiple strands. So as we look at ways to incentivize, how do we look at tying in industry? How do we look at tying in the level that is immediately above and the level that is immediately below? So if we're looking at a middle school, how do we make sure that we're building the correct path for the elementary students? And how do we begin thinking about how we pull the career individuals in? We often tend to think of STEM as maybe we should focus in one specific area. I don't think anyone ever says that we should only teach how to write in third grade. It is a progression. We start with how do we recognize words, how do we form sentences, and then how do we move on to more advanced writing. I think in STEM development, we want to look at that same sort of progression and how do we meet students where they are appropriately, but also give them paths for what the next set of opportunities look like.